We continue now at the top of Daf Kuf Yud Gimel Amud Aleph and Mesechet Yevamos. This is Yevamos Daf 113a. The Gemara in the previous Amud asked, how come by a katana? We say that if a girl gets married as a katana, so then she has something called miyun, she can refuse the marriage and get out of the marriage. But we don't say the same thing by a cheresh, by a situation of a chereshes rather, by a deaf mute. We don't say that she can do miyun. And so the Gemara explains it would actually be to her detriment if she was able to do miyun, because mimni velo nasvila, because then people would refrain and they would not want to marry her. Rashi over here says, Mimni v'lo nasvi lahoelu liolam hiyachola l'mayin. Since she would be able to do miyun forever, mimnei charshusa, because she's a deaf mute. In other words, she would have that option for eternity, and therefore, since she has that option for her entire life, people are going to refrain. Aval ketana, but when it comes to a girl that's a minor, gvul yeshla, there's a boundary. She doesn't have forever to be able to do miyun. V'savar mefaisin ala kol shayt sheyaver zman miyuna. So the person thinks, look, I'll be able to appease her until she becomes an adult, and then she won't have that possibility of miyun. So that's why we allow a possibility of miyun by a katana, but we do not allow it by a chareshes. And the Gemara continues, Umayshna katana. What's the difference by a katana? The achla betruma, that she eats truma. Umayshna chareshes, the lo achla betruma. And what's the difference by a chareshes, by a girl that's a deaf mute? She does not eat truma. Rashi over here says, Mayshna da achla betruma im hisiyasa imal a kohen. We're talking specifically about a case where her mother marries her off to a kohen. She's allowed to eat truma through that marriage again, even though it's only a derabanan marriage. Umayshna chareshes shelo isiyavia bekatanusa she'ein nisua gemurin. Let's say you have a situation again, chareshes, she's not married off by her father when she's a minor, so it's not a doraisa marriage, and the halach is in such a situation, the lo achla, she doesn't need truma if it's a derabanan marriage, kedetanan, like we learned in the Mishnah we're about to see, al lo achla, you see again that she doesn't eat from the truma, so why do we make that distinction? And the Gemara now brings the Mishnah to support this idea, tetanan, as we learned in the Mishnah, there's a Mishnah in Edyas, hey, Rabbi Yochanan ben Gudgada, Rabbi Yochanan ben Gudgada testified, ala charesha she'esiyo aviyah sheyotza beget. Let's say you have a situation of a chareshes that was married off by her father, so then that's a doraisa, that's a situation of a doraisa marriage, and he testified that she's allowed to be divorced with a get. V'al ketana bas Yisrael shenisas l'kohen, and if you have a ketana bas Yisrael who gets married to a kohen, shocheles betruma, she's allowed to eat truma. V'lo chareshes lo achlan, it seems to be that by a chareshes she does not eat truma. This seems to be only a halacha by a ketana and not by a chareshes. And so the Gemara answers, Gezerah, no, the reason for this is there's a Gezerah, there's a decree, Shema Yachel Cheresh bechareshes. Maybe you'll have a situation that the Cheresh is going to allow the Chereshes to eat. And Rashi over here explains, first of all, there is a divorce by a situation of a deaf mute, even if she was married off by her father, Bekatanusa, while she was a minor, Sheyotza beget, she's able to be divorced with a get, even when she gets older. Even if it's not the father that's receiving the get, even if it's her that's receiving the get, she is able to receive it, and she can leave the marriage. The Chiddush is, even though it was a full Kiddushin through the father, the Raisa Kiddushin, below Das it's still going to be considered, even if the gerushin is without the das, it's still considered a get. Like we said previously, a woman is divorced at will, or even if it is against her will, and therefore it works even by a chareshes. And again, also, when it comes to a minor who is married and she's a bas Yisrael and she's married off by her mother, again, it is not a doraisa, it's not a full-fledged marriage, still ochelos betruma, still she can eat truma, even though it's not a full marriage. Rashi over here says she can eat truma that's dirabonan truma. That's what is established in Peraka Isha Rabba. From the fact that you suddenly talk about katana, even though you were dealing with a case of a deaf mute, now you talk about katana by truma. It doesn't say that the chareshes eats truma, so it's clear from the Mishnah that she does not eat truma. And so the Gemara said, the reason is, it's a gezerah that maybe you'll have a situation of a deaf mute man together with a deaf mute woman. Rashi over here says, this is not a perfect answer. Mali pikeach bechareshes, mali cheresh bechareshes. What's the difference if it's a pikeach with a chareshes or a cheresh with a chareshes? What kind of answer is this? Shneim einon nisuin. Both of them are not really full marriages. V'im zumu teres av zumu teres. And if one is mutter, the other one should be mutter. Shareit sad heter shalen eino elo mishum delav b'nei onshin enu v'ave kakotan ochel nevelos. Ela kula mishum gezerah. Rather, Rashi Rashi says, what it means to say is the entire thing really is a gezerah. Shamiyachel cheresh bepikachasu. The real issue is, let's say you have a situation of a cheresh that marries a pikachas. So in such a situation, the iko aleh chi of misa, there she actually has a chi of misa. Kedamina b'maskana de milsa, like we're going to say as we conclude this. Ulachi nakat bereisha shamiyachel cheresh bechareshes v'lo nakat shamiyachel cheresh bepikachas. Now the reason why we write in the Gemara that it's maybe the cheresh will be with the chareshes and not the cheresh with the pikachas, mishum the cheresh bepikachas lo michlef bepikach bechareshes, because that's not going to get confused. No one's going to get confused in a case where the man is a deaf mute and the girl is not, with a case where the man is not a deaf mute and the girl is. However, you can get confused in a situation. You'll get confused between the following two cases: a chareshes who marries a cheresh and a situation of a chareshes who marries a pikach. And then you're going to get mixed up with a case where a cheresh is with a pikachas, becheresh bal charesh is with a case of a cheresh bal chareshes. No one's going to get mixed up in a situation where the girl's a minor and the boy is an adult. They're not going to get mixed up to a case where the girl is an adult and the boy is a minor. That's not going to cause the same confusion, because again, there is no marriage for a katan. And exactly what Rashi said, that's what the Gemara continues over here. So well, what's the big deal? Who cares if a cheresh marries a chereshes? There also she should be able to have the truma, because it's no different than a katan ochel nevelos. That's what Rashi mentioned over here. Rashi said they're lav b'neyon sheninu v'ave kikatan ochel nevelos. It's no different than a minor who eats something that's not kosher, and so it shouldn't be any more of an issue. And therefore, again, it should be fine over here when it's cheresh b'chereshes. Why are we concerned? And so the Gemara says, no, we are concerned because gezeira shemayachil cheresh bepikachas, because we're afraid as follows. Let's say you have a situation where a cheresh, the man is a deaf mute, and he marries a pikachas, and so then already she's a pikachas. She's not considered like a minor. She's not considered like somebody without das, and that would be a problem. But the Gemara continues, v'cheresh bepikachas nami leichel b'truma derabanan. But even a cheresh and a pikachas, why are we so concerned? Let her eat truma. That's only a derabanan level truma. This is a derabanan level marriage, and let her eat the derabanan level truma. What's the big deal? And to that the Gemara says, no, gezerah dil ma'asi la'ochla b'truma doraisa. No, we do have a gezerah that maybe she's going to end up coming to eat truma doraisa by mistake. So in other words, really there should technically be no problem if you have a situation of a marriage with a chareshes. Really, she should be able to have truma derabanan. But again, because of these gezerahs, that you're going to start getting confused, and eventually, as Rashi explained, it would lead to the confusion where you have a situation of a cheresh married to a pikachas, and that might lead to a situation where that pikachas has truma doraisa. And the Gemara continues, Umayshna katana de isla ksuba, Umayshna chareshes de les la ksuba. What's the difference by a katana? That we say the katana is able to receive a ksuba, she's able to have a ksuba as part of the marriage, but a chareshes is not. And so the Gemara answers similar to before, Timkein mimni v'lo nasri la, because again, if the chareshes had a ksuba, so then people would refrain and they would not end up getting married to her. And Rashi over here says, Mimni v'lo nasvila, they would refrain and not marry her, aval bekatana lo mimni, but they're not going to necessarily refrain from marrying a katana, da'asya l'chlal de'ah, because the katana will grow up, she will become an adult, and one day she will have das. And the Gemara continues, Ukatana, when it comes to a katana, minolan dislike ksuba. Where's the source? How do we know that she does receive the ksuba? The Tanan, as we learned in the Mishnah, Hamima'enes, Vahashniya, Va'ailanis, Ein lehen ksuba. If you have a situation where there was miyun done, or let's say you have a situation of a shniya, again, that's the case of arayos on a drabonin level, or let's say you have a situation of an ailanis, that's a girl who is underdeveloped sexually, so in those cases they don't have ksuba. Aval yotza beget, but they are divorced with a get. Ukatana yesh la ksuba. And a katana, she does receive a ksuba, and so therefore here you see the source that a katana gets a ksuba. And the Gemara continues, V'chareshes minolan de lesla ksuba. Now how do we know the chareshes, that if the woman is a deaf mute, that she does not receive a ksuba? The Tanya, as we learned in a Braisa, Cheresh v'shota shanaso pikchos. Let's say you have a case where the man is a cheresh or the man is a shota and marries a pikacha, asafa pishin espakecha cheresh v'nishtafa shota. Even if the situation turned around and the cheresh became no longer a deaf mute, or the shota he got das, he was no longer a shota, ein lohem aleim klum. The halach is they have no claim against them. In other words, there is no claim of a ksuba in such a situation. However, Ratzu l'kaiman, however, let's say they want to maintain the marriage. In other words, after the men become competent, they want to maintain the marriage. Yesh lem ksuba. So then the women are in fact entitled to the ksuba money. And now the Brisa says the other way around. Let's say it's a bikeach. The man is the bikeach. He's the one that is healthy. He's not a deaf mute. He's not a shota, and he marries a woman that's a chareshes, that's a deaf mute, or he marries a woman that's a shota. Afilu kasav la meya mana. Even if he writes over a ksuba to her of 100 moneh, ksubasa kayemis, that ksuba is going to be good, mipnei sheratza lizuk ben chasuf, because he's the one that wants to harm his own property. In other words, the point of the brisa is, if the man is a pikeach, so then if he chooses to have a ksuba, that's fine. That harm is he's putting upon himself. He volunteers it. And so the Gemara says, time of the ratza, the only reason there's a ksuba here is because the man wants to do it. Hello ratza, but if he wouldn't want to, ain't la, apparently she would not have ksuba. So you see again from this brisa that the chareshes, she doesn't get the ksuba, and then the question is, why is that the case? Again, why do we make this distinction? And the Gemara says, Dimkein mimni velo nasvila. The reason is, again, because they will refrain, they won't want to marry her if she's entitled to a ksuba. But the Gemara says, if so, if that's the case, pikachas l'cheresh liskin l'ksuba. We should say the other way around. Let's say the woman is a pikachas and the man is a cheresh. We should say there is a ksuba over there. Dimkein mimni velo minsavi, because otherwise the pikachas, the women are not going to want to get married to a man who's a cheresh. So we should encourage that marriage by saying that there is a ksuba. And to that, the Gemara says, Yoser mishoish rotza lisa, isha rotza linase. More than a man wants to get married, a woman wants to get married. In other words, we don't need to institute a ksuba in order to encourage a pikachas to marry a cheresh, because that's going to happen anyway. A woman wants to get married more than a man. And Rashi over here explains, Ein lahen aleim klum. Again, we say that in a situation where the man is a cheresh or shota, so then there's no claim of ksuba. The woman does not collect the ksuba. Why? De ein lem das, because in those cases, the men have no das, vein to know harishon tanai. So any original condition that they make is not worth anything. V'afagav the tikun rabbanon nisuin l'cheresh. Now, even though the rabbanon instituted marriage for a cheresh, lo takinu lo rabbanon ksuba minei. The rabbanon did not institute that she gets a ksuba from him in such a situation. Kedem efarish l'kamon, like will be explained later on. Yoster mimashe that a man does not want to get married as much as a woman, so the encouragement, we don't need to institute a ksuba in order to encourage that marriage. And again, the Brisa said sharotza lizok ben chasav over there. If the man is a pikeach, so he wants to damage his own property, meaning to say he volunteers the ksuba. Even though the chachamim didn't institute a ksuba, hareu kasav, he wrote her a ksuba. Hoel v'rotza lahafsid v'lios nizok ben chasav tano kayim. If that's what he wants to do, his tanai is kayim. So again, the Gemara said from there, you see that there is no ksuba in such a situation. And the Gemara said, Im kain deboy l'meisav lo ksuba mimni v'lo nasvila. Again, the Gemara said, he's not going to want to marry, no one's going to want to marry the chareshes if there was an institution of ksuba, and that's why it's not an obligation. And the Gemara continues, Ha'u cheresh dehava b'shivavuse de Rav Malkio. There was a deaf mute who lived in the neighborhood of Rav Malkio. So he married him off to a woman. And Rav Malkio even included a ksuba there, 400 zuz from his property, from the man's property. He included a ksuba in the marriage. And so the Gemara continues, Amar Rava says, Man chokim Rav Malkio, who is as wise as Rav Malkio, the Gavra Rabbu, he's a great man, kasavar, because he held as follows, Ilu ratza shifcha l'shamsho. Let's say this deaf mute wanted to get a shifcha to serve him, a maidservant. Milo zavninon le, wouldn't we purchase one for him? So kol shekein hacha, so certainly over here, we can include the ksuba, we can include the payment, so to speak, dikotarti, because now he's getting two things out of it. He's getting a shifcha to serve him, and he's also getting a wife, and so therefore Rav Malkio understood that we should give the woman the ksuba. And the Gemara continues, Amar Rav Chia Barashi, Amar Shmuel. Rav Chia Barashi says in the name of Shmuel, Eishes cheresh, the wife of a cheresh, ein chayavin aleha asham tali. Let's say somebody has relations with the wife of a cheresh, so it's a situation, maybe you would consider it like a suffix eishes ish. But he says, no, the halacha is there is no asham tali, there is no carbon in that situation, even though normally when you have a suffix situation, whether you committed such an avera, you would bring an asham tali, that's the carbon for a suffix. Over here, you don't have that. Rashi over here says, ein chayavin aleha asham tali, the name of suffix eishes ishi, suffix haya boda, suffix ein, but we should say this is also a suffix eishes ish because there's a doubt. Did this person have das, or did this person not have das? And then you should say the person has relations with her, it should be an asham taloi. Devadai ein lo shum kinyan minator. He says, no, it's not true. It's not a suffix situation. Rather, minator, there is no kinyan whatsoever, and there's no chiyuv of an asham taloi. And the Gemara continues, Lema Messiah, let's say the following support for what Shmuel says. It says, Chamisha lo yisromu, there are 5 people who shouldn't take off truma. V'im tarmu ein trumas on truma. Not only that, if they do take off truma, it is not going to be effective. Ve'elohen, and they are the following individuals, Cheresh, v'shota, v'katan, if you have a deaf mute, an imbecile, and a minor, v'atorem eshe'eno shalo, somebody who takes off truma off property that is not his, v'over kochavim shetaram shal Yisrael, and let's say you have a situation of a non-Jew who takes off truma of a Yisrael, afilu b'reshus Yisrael, even with the permission of the Yisrael, ein truma, so truma that is not going to be an effective truma. And Rashi over here explains, HaTorah Mesheino Shalo. Again, one of the cases was he takes off Truma on property that doesn't belong to him, V'lo Tzivo Balabayis. The case over here is that the Balabayis didn't instruct him to do so. The Shlichus Nafkolon Me'atem Gam Atem L'Rabo Shluchachem, because there is a concept of Shlichus, Hilkach Ma'atem L'Daitchem Af Shluchachem L'Daitchem. However, the concept of Shlichus has to be L'Daitchem. It has to be L'Das. It has to be that he instructed him to do so. Otherwise, it is not effective. V'Ovid Kochavim Shatarim Eshel Yisrael Afila B'Shas Ba'ila Meina Truma. Let's say an idol worshipper takes off Truma of Yisrael, even if it is with permission, it's not Truma. De Ba'inan Ma'atem B'nei Bris, Av Shluchachem B'nei Bris, because the halacha by Shlichus is, it has to be only by Jews, only by B'nei Bris. In any case, V'Katani Miyah, Cheresh Ein Truma, so Truma Mutaris Lazar. It says when a Cheresh takes off Truma, it's nothing, and a Zar, even a non-Kohen, is allowed to eat it. V'Safek Truma V'Yachzer V'Yitrumi B'Ilei. Now, if it was a Suffolk situation, so it should be Truma, but then you should have to take off additional Truma. So therefore, you see, this is a support for the idea that, again, when the Cheresh does it on a Doraisa level, it has no effect whatsoever. It's not considered even a suffix. But the Gemara continues, this Mishnah in Trumos is not necessarily a support for Shmuel, because who da Amar Rebbe Lazar, because it could be that he really holds like Rebbe Lazar. The Tanya, as we learned in a Braisa, Rabbi Yitzchak Omer Mishum Rebbe Lazar, Rabbi Yitzchak says in the name of Rebbe Lazar, Trumas Cheresh lo teitze lechulim. When you have a situation of a Cheresh who takes off Truma, it should not be considered chulin, Mimneishu Safik, because it actually is a Safik, meaning it is possible that Shmuel does in fact hold that the Truma of Cheresh is a Safik, not like this Mishnah in Trumas that we just quoted. And so the Gemara follows up. He's Svira Rebbe Lazar. If Shmuel really does hold like Rebbe Lazar, so Asham Tali Nami L'chayev. So in a situation where a person has Eishes Cheresh, the wife of a Cheresh, he has relations with her. So there also you should be Chayev and Asham Tali, because again it should be considered, since it's a situation of a Cheresh, it should be considered a situation of Suffolk, and you should bring an Asham Tali because it's a Suffolk Eishes Ish. And so to that the Gemara answers, Ba'inan Chaticha Mishtei Chatichos. No, it's not true. And Asham Tali only applies when you have one of two items and you're not sure exactly which one you took. That is the situation of an Asham Talui. And Rashi over here explains, Hu Da'amr Rebbe Lazar Kolomer Mehalo Tesai. In other words, the Mishnah is not a support at all. The Gabe Truma Svir Leila Shmuel Rebbe Lazar. It could very well be by Truma that Shmuel holds like Rebbe Lazar, not like the Mishnah we just quoted. The Safek, that really when a Cheresh takes off Truma, it is a Safek. The Gabe Ishto, and by the wife of a Cheresh. Afal Gav the Safek, even though there is a doubt over here, we really do treat it as a Safek situation in terms of a marriage. Eina Ba'asham Talei, still is no Asham Talei. The Gabe Asham Talei Ksiv Achas Mikol Mitzvos Hashem V'Karinan Mitzvos. It says in the pasuk Mitzvos Hashem, and we read the word Mitzvos in plural. Demash Machad Mitarti, meaning to say it has to be one of two items. Sheyesh Heter V'Isr Lefanav, meaning there's something mutter and there's something asr in front of him. Kagon Ishto Ve'Ishes Ish Imo, like for example, let's say a person is with his wife, but he's also with an Eshes Ish, Bebayis in the same house. V'Savar Ein Sham El Ishto, he thinks it's only his wife in the house. Ubala Achas U'Leboka Nimsu Shtei, and then he has relations with one. In the morning he finds they're both there. V'lo Yada Le'Ezuba, he doesn't know he had relations with. That is a case of an Asham Tali. And Rashi over here continues, V'chein Chaylev V'Shuman Lefanav. You can likewise have a case, let's say you have a situation where a person has Chaylev and Shuman in front of him, different kinds of fats. The Chaylev is not kosher, the Shuman is kosher. V'Savar Shtei and Shuman, he thinks both of them are Shuman. V'Yachal Achas, may needs one of them. Well, Asof Noda Lo Sha'achas Chaylev, he finds out later that one of them was not kosher, was Chaylev. V'lo Yada Ezuachal, he doesn't know which one he ate. The Yada Maisi Chatas Nekev. In such a situation, if he knew he'd bring a Chatas, V'Chaldu Afilu Baz Danka V'Hashtu the Lo Yada, maybe Asham Zachar. But now that he doesn't know, so he brings this carbon Asham, it's a male, because of Shkolim. Aval Hacha, but over here, Rashi contrasts. Sha'asavik Tali B'Chaticha Achas, here it's all one item in this situation. He's having relations with this woman who's married to a Cheresh. Safik Isser, Safik Heter, we don't know if it's Isser or Heter. So Lo Maisi Asham Tali. So here he would make a distinction, and Shmuel would say that there's no Asham Tali. But the Gemara continues, Umiboy Rebbe Lazar Chaticha Mishtei Chatichos, but is it really true that Rebbe Lazar holds when it comes to an Asham Taloi, you require two items? Vatanya, but didn't we learn in a Braisa, Rebbe Lazar, Omer Rebbe Lazar says, Koi, when it comes to the creature called a Koi, that is a creature that it is unclear whether it is a Chay or a Behema. So the halach is, Chayav and Al Chelbo, Asham Taloi, you are Chayav if you eat the Chaylev of a Koi and Asham Taloi, because it's a suffix situation whether that Chaylev is prohibited, because again, it's a suffix whether the animal is a Chay or a Behema. And so here you have one item and not two items. So you see Rebbe Lazar says there's an Asham Talui even on one item. And so to that the Gemara says, Shmuel Savar Rebbe Lazar Bechada Upalagaleb Bechada. So Shmuel will hold like Rebbe Lazar in one regard, meaning when it comes to the situation of a Cheresh, he's going to hold that it is a suffix. However, he's going to disagree with Rebbe Lazar when it comes to an Asham Talui. And again, Shmuel is going to hold that you need Chaticha Mishtei Chatichos in order to bring an Asham Talui. And the Gemara continues, V'ika di'amri, some have another version of the above discussion. Amar Rav Chia bar Ashi, Amar Shmuel. Rav Chia bar Ashi says in the name of Shmuel, Eishes cheresh chayavin oleh asham talui. In this version, Shmuel says that if a person has relations with the wife of a cheresh, so the person is chayav in asham talui, because it's considered a situation of a suffix eishes ish. And so the Gemara says, Meisvei, we have a question, Chamisha lo yisromu. It says by a case of a cheresh, that's one of the 5 cases, it's not considered truma, meaning it's not considered a suffix. And again, the Gemara will answer according to this version, Savar like Rebbe Lazar. So Shmuel will hold like Rebbe Lazar that by a cheresh it is considered a suffix situation. And the Gemara continues, by Rav Ashi asks the following question, my time with the Rebbe Lazar, what's the reason of Rebbe Lazar? Why does he consider an Eishes cheresh to be a suffix of an Eishes ish? Mivshad pshita lei, the cheresh daita klishtu. Is it obvious to him that a cheresh has a weak kind of das, a smaller kind of das? Umiu, but nevertheless, misafkale, he has the following doubt. Idaita tzilusa, is it a clear kind of das? Rashi over here says, klishta daka kolomar daita muetas, he has a small amount of das. Shein mechuded lahavin kashar b'nei adam, he's not as sharp as other people. Umiu misafkale, but nevertheless, Rebbe Lazar has the following suffix. Idaita tzilusa hi osa ktsas hadas sheyeshlo im tzlulahi, is that little amount of das that the cheresh has, is that a clear kind of das? Uvameshu nosen daito v'yosa davar vadei kavanaso kavana. And if he sets his mind to something, so certainly his kavana would be considered a real kavana. And we'll continue with this discussion in the next video on Daf Yud Gimel Amud Beis.